Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Dorman, and I serve as the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Princeton Public Library. This evening's program, Attracting Birds Beyond the Birdfeeder, is being presented in partnership with the Rutgers Master Gardeners of Mercer County. We are gathering tonight on Zoom. This session is being recorded, and the live transcription has been enabled. If you have any questions for our panelists at any point during the talk, we ask that you put them in the Q&A function and preferably not the chat. With so many of us gathered here today, it may be difficult to see questions that are in the chat function. If you are using a mobile device, the Q&A function may be in the top right-hand corner of your screen. This evening's program is part of our community's endeavors to raise awareness around the work of the Cornell Bird Ornithology Lab, Audubon, and Oiseau Canada. To do what we can to invite more birds into our community for next year's count, we are delighted to join forces with the Rutgers Master Gardeners of Mercer County to present Attracting Birds Beyond the Birdfeeder. This evening's program will be introduced by Master Gardener Kathleen Yerwitt.
Well, thank you, Kim. The Rutgers Master Gardeners of Mercer County are very pleased to offer this program in collaboration with the Princeton Public Library. As part of Rutgers Cooperative Extension Services located in Ewing, we are committed to offering educational programs to the public and helpline services on a variety of topics, especially responsible gardening. We are so pleased to have Kathy Easton with us tonight. She is a professional birder in New Jersey for the past 40 years. In addition, she has been active in environmental education featuring these fine feathered friends. Besides attracting birds to her native plant garden all year round, she also is active in environmental awareness in a number of organizations. Currently, she is the Associate Naturalist for New Jersey Audubon. She is the birder resident for the Mercer County Master Gardeners, and she is also chair of the Cranbury Shade Tree Commission. Now, tonight, Kathy is going to help us become acquainted with an assortment of backyard birds and with the native plants to attract them. Without further ado, let us welcome Kathy Easton, birder extraordinaire.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me while I talk about birds, the most watchable wildlife in the world that we live. And here we go. So, attracting birds to your garden or your backyard is really very simple. They need all the same things that we need. They need food, and food comes in the way of natural food, the food that they have co-evolved with over millennia. So that includes insects, berries, seeds, and birds, because of course we have raptors that eat birds. So if we have small birds in our garden, we'll also have some raptors, and that's okay. It's tough, but that's how it works. If the water fresh and open, that could be anything from a small bird bath. Maybe you have water running through your property. There's a lot of options, and all of the options regarding native plants and well, especially native plants, because those are the plants that our birds and insects evolved with. So there's a lot of codependency there. So cover in all seasons. They need shelter. White pines are great for that. Hemlock, spruce, juniper. So I'll be telling you about a few of my backyard birds. And of course, shrubs and plants provide nesting sites and materials. And that's, of course, during the summer season when our all year round birds are nesting, as well as our neotropical migrants and other migrants that return to the area. Today, we're going to be talking mostly about, excuse me, a lot of birds that are present all year round. And then a few winter residents that will be leaving shortly. Native plants, there's a lot of references, which I'll show on a later page, but native plants they rock the bird world because they attract insects that the birds eat, and they have berries that are ripe at the right time when they need them, whether it's spring food, high lipid content food in the fall. Moving along. So in terms of your garden, your area, leave some leaf litter. I know how tempting it is to rake all of the leaves off of the turf and from around all of the plants. But the thing is that a lot of insects overwinter in there, as well as, I mean, sometimes they're in the stem, the hollow stem of a plant. There are eggs that are in there. There are also seeds that are in the litter from your stalks of your plants. Maybe don't cut them down at the end of the fall, but let them weather through the winter so they can provide a place to perch and a home for insects. Reduce turf areas. There's something known as a freedom lawn. Look it up. But if you want to have a quality turf area, of course, consult the Master Gardener webpage or attend a session. Be river friendly. Try not to use any chemicals that will affect life, bird life or mammal life. It's a really tricky thing, so be aware. And river friendly, you can actually be a river friendly qualified resident. I think there's a program at the Watershed Institute for that. My yard is river friendly. Offer plant diversity. That doesn't mean one of everything, because you certainly want to have enough food for everybody during the season, and you want to offer food all through the year. So that's why you want to offer plant diversity. It will also reward you with many seasons of interest. So, and plant natives. And that's not to say not to plant non-natives. There's a lot of wonderful flowering perennials that aren't necessarily native, but they don't spread or invade natural landscapes, and they provide lots of nectar as well as color. Nectar for pollinators, nectar for hummingbirds, and then seeds perhaps for the sparrows in the winter. So provide food for pollinators, beneficial insects, and birds, because they're all connected, the plants, the birds, the insects, and on up the chain. This is a red-spotted purple, one of my favorite butterflies. This is a lacewing. This is a beneficial insect. And this is a yellow warbler, which will be returning late April, early May from the neotropical area of the world. This is a male yellow warbler, and it will return to the garden to eat, as many other migrants do from the south below the equator. They come back, or near that area. They come back because in our temperate region, in the spring, moth larvae and butterfly larvae and all kinds of insect larvae hatch out over all of our native trees, and there's an abundance of fat, juicy caterpillars, lots of protein to feed little baby songbirds. And so, and this has been going on forever. This is why birds migrate. What brings all those neotropical migrants up from South America and Central America? Because there's this glut of fat, juicy caterpillars and appropriate plants so that they can raise their young. So we'll look at some plants. Serviceberry. I have a serviceberry. This is actually one of the few pictures that is my own. I have a serviceberry. This is the fruit that comes, later in the season. So I have seen during the fruiting time, I've certainly seen insects when it blooms, because it's an early bloomer and it's a nectar source. And then the fruit. So in my little serviceberry, and I only have one on the front corner of the property near the road, I've seen, let's see, great crested flycatcher, catbird, robin, cedar waxwing, titmouse, chickadee, and that's just to name a few. This is ninbark, but spelled like ninebark, and I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I think it's ninbark, but this is spelled like ninebark. This is also sort of an early plant for pollinator, and it attracts a lot of insects. Spice bush, and these are the spice bush berries. This attracts a lot of animals, and so it's pretty here in the early spring season when it flowers, and then it is attractive with fruit that feeds the birds in another season. These are more early summer blooming plants. This is called Itea or Virginia Sweet Spire. This is Arrowood Viburnum. These are the flowers and these are the fruits. I have these plants in my garden. The Arrowood Viburnum attracts anything that eats fruit. And so I had loads and loads, especially the catbird. In the winter, I want to tell you, in the winter, a mockingbird is a denizen of my yard. We sort of have a friendship, and the same is true of the catbirds in the summer. And the catbirds feast on these, and they last into the summer, and their young feast on these. And I have 2 bushes right by my back door, so I have all kinds of close encounters. Moving on in the season, aster and lots of other nectar providing plants are great to have in the garden. This is the only picture I have of a perennial. All of the others are shrubs or trees. This is dogwood, of course. I used to have a dogwood outside the office window where I sit now. And more than one season, I had it for a long time. And before I lost it, many seasons, I watched the robins under waxwings pick the tree clean just outside the window. This is chokeberry. It's actually, I meant to put a picture of it flowering here and I didn't. It's got a very pretty flower in the spring, and this is the fruit that the birds, and not just the birds, there are other things that eat them too. I think the squirrels like them. A chokeberry, not chokecherry, but they're related, is a really popular fruit. And the catbirds are eating this toward the end of the season when they're getting ready to migrate. We have ilex here, our hollies, American holly. Everyone must, I hope that many of you have had the experience of watching robins enjoy hollies from the holly tree, or perhaps cedar waxwings, because both of them eat fruit in the winter. And then winterberry. And I have, these are all on my very small parcel of land. The holly trees actually, when I first moved here 40 years ago, there were little teeny tiny plants that the birds had planted from ingesting them and pooping out the seeds. And so I nursed them along, and now they're 15 feet high. They're not all girls like this one, but you've got to have the guys too, so they can be pollinated. And this is known as Eastern Red Cedar. It's actually a juniper, but it's known as Eastern Red Cedar. And so now I'll begin to tell you the story of my winter friend, a mockingbird. Okay, so the mockingbird eats, I also have another holly that is, I can't think, it's sky pencil, it's got little blackberries. Well, the mockingbird arrives late in the fall and sticks through the winter. I provide fresh water daily. This bird will remind me, it'll come to the back door, it'll come to my bedroom window. It sort of owns 3 small juniper trees because it's loaded with these delicious fruits. And it will challenge any other bird that comes around. But if a flock of birds comes around, especially a mixed flock, it really doesn't have a chance. I will be talking a little bit about mixed flocks tonight. So on to birds. Obviously, a lot of people feed birds with commercial bird seed or homegrown seed, whatever. But tonight we're talking about native food, native plants, and the birds that eat them, because these are our both of these birds are all year round. This, of course, is a chickadee. I don't know whether the chickadees I'm showing you are black-capped or Carolina, because I don't remember when I download these slides. And also, what's changed since I've been birding is Carolina chickadees and black-capped chickadees have interbred, and so some of them have different songs. You can't rely on the one song always being the Carolina or the other song always being pure black-capped. When I first started birding, it was pretty easy because the Piedmont, where all you folks in Princeton live, working up to the Sourlands, that was sort of the line. Black-capped chickadees were there, and north of there, and then south were the Carolinas. But they're all chickadees. They're wonderful year-round residents. They're very smart, adorable, and now we're going to talk about birds for the rest of the duration. So tufted titmouse and chickadee. And yes, if you're really patient and you want a bird to eat out of your hand, these are the 2 birds that will probably do it, but you've got to stand still a long time, and it better be a really good quality seed. Close up of the chickadee, because it's adorable. The chickadee cannot open a seed in its bill, like let's say a cardinal or a finch can. It needs to whack it against something hard to break it open, and the titmouse needs to do that too. The titmouse caches, C-A-C-H-E-S, a lot of seeds so that it has food all winter. There was a study done in the Northwest that indicated that an individual chickadee cached some 1,000 seeds and then located them over the season to consume them. Fascinating. Just some more chickadee shots. And this is, of course, a sweet gum ball, a native plant. It's tricky to have if it's anywhere near a sidewalk or any place where you want to walk, because it's easy to trip on the balls. But that's a native plant, the liquid ambar. I can't remember the second name. Tufted titmouse again. These guys are super, super feisty. I had an apple tree when I moved in here, and we had to have it removed about 20 years later. And you know, we kept it pruned and alive for as long as we could, because in the spring things would come through like indigo bunting, rose-breasted grosbeak. Sometimes they would come in for a little pollen or eat the petals. And then the last year that we had it, there was a little cavity that was just outside the back window, and didn't a titmouse nest there for the first time. We watched it raise its young. We watched them leave the nest. And actually one night we snuck out with a flashlight and just looked at them sleeping all curled up, these super fluffy, adorable titmice. It's very feisty. It likes to line its nest with fur, like, or hair, like a lot of other songbirds do. But this one doesn't necessarily wait for a stray one to be about. It might pluck a fur from a dog, golden retriever maybe. It also might pluck a fur, a piece of fur hair from the tail of a squirrel. It's that feisty. Oh, the other thing I just want to mention really quick about these two birds is during the winter, when they mix up with other birds and travel sort of occasionally in a flock, and they all have their own feeding niche, these two guys act as sentinels and will warn the whole group if there's something happening they should all be aware of. White-breasted nuthatch sounds like sort of like a little horn, and it sounds a lot like it sounds a lot like a woodpecker, and people often mistake it for that. It almost always is descending a tree head first. White-breasted nuthatch. Two wrens, our year-round wren, Carolina wren, and our summer wren, the house wren. I'm going to play each of their songs. Here is the house wren. Wait till April. My house wren returns to the yard on April 24th, like clockwork every year. These guys, the wonderful Carolina wrens, they mate for life. They have this distinctive white eyebrow stripe, and the male sings just about the whole year long. I'm going to play a duet of the Carolina wren. The male is the one that's singing, and that sort of sounds like, well, anyway, the males, I'm not going to imitate it. And then the trill is the female answering. They're duetting. Male. Male, female. So they duet like that. You can, and it's quite wonderful. These guys skulk around, both of them, the wrens and the wren family. They skulk around in low bushes. They eat spiders. They use spider webs to line their nest and to hold it together. Fascinating little creatures, little tiny birds, great big voices. Here's another bird that is not as noticeable. It's here in the winter. We also see it in, well, a lot in fall migration, a little bit in spring migration, but a lot in fall migration. And if you have spruces or pines, white pine, this bird is a golden crowned kinglet. And it also has sort of a big voice for a little bird, and it's quite distinctive because it's tiny, and you do see this black and yellow on the crown. So if you see something tiny moving in and out of the pine or the spruce or a hemlock, look to see if it's a golden crowned kinglet. So the mockingbird. So the mockingbird, and I'll play the mockingbird, is, as I say, my buddy during the winter. I go outside, it comes near. Spring is in the air because the mockingbird just started to sing about 3 weeks ago. First, a little bit here, a little bit there, and now it's almost going full tilt. And of course, the mockingbird, a mimic, will make all the sounds of the birds in the neighborhood. I mean, not all of the birds in the neighborhood, but I've been talking to it in my own silly voice regularly for years now. This bird comes, and I try to always make sure it has fresh water, and then it has all the food in the garden already with the berries and the insects. And of course, he doesn't spend the whole day here. But anyway, that's oh, and I'm now recording myself instead of playing the mocker. So let me play the mocker, and this is a mocker. The mocker repeats the song 3 to 5 times of the bird that it is imitating. It can also imitate mechanical sounds, an alarm clock, according to someone I know, all kinds of interesting things in its neighborhood. Northern mockingbird, not the best picture. Catbird. So when the mockingbird, soon after the mockingbird leaves the winter and does not, I don't think nests in my backyard, it goes somewhere else. The catbird arrives, and a family of catbirds eventually. So this is also a mimic, and the catbird makes a lot of different sounds, including sort of a cat sound, which is why it's called a catbird. But they have this distinctive dark cap, beautiful gray, and they have rusty undertail coverts, which you'll be lucky to see if you, because it does sort of get lost in the shadow if you don't get it in good light. So these guys keep me company from May 1st almost into October, the family. Enjoying what's in the garden. The best part is the compost. I talked about leaving leaf litter. When you do clean up your leaves, maybe establish a compost in your garden, and you can visit Mercer Educational Gardens on Federal City Road to see demonstrations of that. Never let the leaves leave your property if you can help it. It's black gold. So anyway, this guy, if I in a freshly turned compost, will come over and collect whatever migrated to the top in terms of little insects. Makes a lot of different says a lot of different things, but this bird only repeats things about 3 times, and then that's it, and then it goes on to something else. But it does sound like a cat occasionally, and here's a catbird. I'm sorry, that recording does not have the sound, the little sound of the cat that it makes. I apologize for that. These are red-bellied woodpeckers. This is the male. The red goes from the back of the head all the way to the front. This is the female. She has the red here. Now, they're not red-headed woodpeckers. Red-headed woodpeckers are pretty much gone from New Jersey, although there are a few places you can still see them. These are red-bellied woodpeckers. When I first started birding, there weren't so many. They're opportunists. They've extended their the northern end of their range up here. They're very vocal. They're very beautiful in flight. And I know it seems like a misnomer to call them red-bellied. However, they have a teeny tiny little bit of pink on their lower belly, which you can really only see sometimes. And that's what makes them red-bellied woodpeckers. And they sound a trill, and they've been drumming. In the spring, woodpeckers drum a rhythmic sound on some kind of resonant material, like maybe your chimney or your gutters, or a hollow piece of wood. And that drumming is a communication. They're communicating to their potential mate, or strengthening the bond between their mate. This is a Downey woodpecker. As I said, all these birds are commonly found in all of our backyards because there's sort of a jump off of the backyard bird count. This is the female, this is the male. In a lot of woodpecker species, the male has some red and the female doesn't. So we also have hairy woodpeckers locally here in New Jersey. And they've sort of come back since I've been birding. There weren't so many for a while, and they look almost identical, except for some subtle signs, which I won't mention. But the main thing that is different between them, I'm sorry I don't have a comparison slide, but the Downey woodpecker has a lot of whiskers. You see all these whiskers, lots of whiskers, and its bill, the length of its bill is shorter, than the length of its head. And you can see this demonstrated too, even when it's holding a seed. These guys are around all year. They dig into crevices with their tongues. You'd be surprised how long a woodpecker's tongue is. You don't usually see it, but in several species of woodpeckers, their tongue is so long that it actually sort of retracts up around behind their eye sockets. So they're always digging into crevices, and this is the Downey woodpecker that many people think is just the cutest woodpecker ever, which it really is. And they're the woodpecker that you'll see holding onto a skinny stalk somewhere. Another woodpecker would not be holding onto a skinny little grass stalk or something. That's always a Downey. So the denizen of our gardens, American robin. For a long time, many people call it a harbinger of spring, which it is because it returns to our gardens in March, or whenever the sort of average daily temperature is around 37 and sticking. And they're an early nester, but they also have several broods, as many birds do. So the American robin is very interesting because, and I'm sure you're all acquainted with it in the summer. In the fall, it gathers in these huge flocks, and they roost together at night, and then during the day they disperse and feed in different areas. So our robins, our local robins, don't migrate very far at all. I mean, just really within state, but the more northerly robins do migrate through the state and beyond. And so I think in this winter, maybe it's safe to say that some of them are our guys just moving around, as well as maybe some migrants who have come south. So this year I very happily discovered a robin roost, not for the first time, but this one very close to my home. And I was shocked and surprised and happy to see that they roosted in bamboo, the invasive bamboo, the big bad thing you don't ever want to put in your garden, the invasive bamboo. There's a huge stand along the Millstone River that's really just about in the river, and they all went in there. And when I say they all, it was hundreds of robins, and it was just glorious. And as I've been continuing to visit the site, it seems like fewer robins are coming in at night because maybe they're starting to spread out and gravitate toward their nesting grounds. Wonderful bird, great vocabulary. It looks for earthworms, although it cocks its head and you think it might be listening. No, it's actually looking and can see the earthworms as well as the other food. In the winter, it really changes its diet and eats a lot of berries. Lots of berries, holly berries. Sometimes you can see them mixed with cedar waxwings, which are true frugivores. So the robin changes its diet and eats a lot of berries in the winter, and there's nothing more pleasant and joyful than seeing a robin or 50 robins in the snow in the winter. This little guy, this is, I guess I talked about one of the warbler, the yellow warbler. This is our winter warbler. Yellow rumped warbler. You can see the yellow rump. I think this guy is in breeding plumage, and this is maybe a female. Maybe she's in breeding plumage too. I'm not sure. But in the winter, the males look a lot like this. They lose the dark gray and the black, and they have a little yellow on the top and the shoulder, and they often travel in groups. And they have they're one of the few warblers that can eat certain fruits that are covered in wax, like bayberries. Bayberries really help them subsist, and they help sustain them in the winter. Bayberries, they have these little birds, these tiny little birds, who migrate and are only here in the winter hanging around, and then they migrate out, and then we'll see them again going through in the spring, from the south going through, and then when they come back in the fall. They have a special enzyme in their stomach that helps them digest the wax. And so these are yellow rumped warblers, and they're the myrtle race of the yellow rumped warbler. There's an Audubon race which has yellow here, and that's west of the Rockies. That's our winter warbler, yellow rumped warbler, the myrtle race. So everyone knows and loves cardinals, the male and the female. Sometimes this time of year, people will call and say, or maybe more like April, I suppose, not this time of year, that a cardinal will be perched on the side of their car and seeming to spar with itself in the side view mirror. Well, that's bird hormones, awakened and wanting to defend their territory and be robust and look good for the females. And if that happens, if they're and the females do it as well, if they are a sort of a nuisance, you can fold your side view mirror in or put something against the window that it wears so it can't see its reflection, or somehow just make sure the bird can't see its reflection, and that will take care of that. These guys mate for life. They are they're in the grosbeak family, very large beaks. So they can, unlike several birds we talked about before, like titmouse, nuthatch, chickadee, they can break open a seed and take the husk out with, using their tongue in their bill. They can peel a grape in their mouth, and they have a beautiful plumage that looks particularly striking in the winter, because something does happen with the male bird where he appears more red. And they have a very strong bond. I've seen them exchanging seeds up on a tree. I've seen them doing, I forget what it's called now, where they rub each other's bill against each other. They're wonderful, sweet birds and very feisty, and their babies are adorable. So this is a purple finch, and a lot of people think that they have purple finches at their feeders, which would be great, but probably not. This is a northern finch that just graces our, when I say our, I mean central Jersey, our yards, every so often when there's a seed shortage up north, or a big stock of seeds down here, a really good amount of seeds. So it's the purple, it's the purple finch. And so it's sort of raspberry on white. And here's a comparison of a male raspberry on white, sort of raspberry or orange raspberry on brown. House finch, purple finch. Oh, sorry. House finch, purple finch. And these are the ones that are most common at the bird feeder. But these guys can appear too. And here are the females. The female purple finch has a very special, I don't know why I'm calling it special. She has lovely white eye line, and she's brown on white. Here's a goldfinch behind her. And here is the female house finch. I just realized I forgot to play I did play the catbird, sorry. Okay, so these guys, now we're going to say goodbye to a couple of winter sparrows that spend the winter here, but are not here except migration or during the winter, but they come to spend the winter. It's a white-throated sparrow. These are the mature guys, so you can see their white throats. There's a tan striped variety, and there's a white striped variety. And what's interesting is these guys get married. The tan striped guys marry the white striped birds, and then I guess they have the eggs hatch both tan striped and white striped. I hope I have that song on here. So they'll be gone around April. They'll have left, and they have a lovely song. White-throated sparrow breeds up north like Canada. And you'll hear more of that as spring approaches, as well as the tinkling bell sound of this bird, dark-eyed junco. For a long time, they called it slate-colored junco, I think, but it's now dark-eyed junco. And they all don't look exactly like this. Some have more brown, some are less dark gray, but they do have the white bellies, and some people call them snowbirds. They also have white and gray in their tail, and some people call them snowbirds because they're here in the winter. This guy, this is a fox sparrow, and this is here in the winter as well. It has this yellow lower mandible. Fox sparrows range across the US, but the further west you go, they get a little bit grayer. I forget exactly where they're the reddest, and that's, I think, why they're called fox sparrows. But this fox sparrow is quite bright, and for many years, during spring migration, March, I would have one or so fox sparrows at my bird feeder. But, and this is quite a while ago, because I replaced any invasives in my plant, and over time I created this native garden that sort of has borders on both sides of shrubs. And so it's not quite open enough for this one to visit so much anymore, because it's not as open as it used to be. But this is a lovely, I'm not sure I have the song of this one, but it has a lovely song, Fox Sparrow. And here it is, yes. I hope some of these sounds are reminding you of the spring that is on its way. A lot of birds are singing right now. This guy is singing a lot. Song sparrow, lives here all year round, beautiful buffy brown and maybe a little white, and sometimes has this central spot. Song sparrow. Oh, and I do have a song sparrow, and I bet everyone will recognize this because it sings all the time and all through the summer because it's a year-round resident. Lots of sparrows have wonderful songs. So now we're going to talk, I'm going to talk actually. This is does anyone know what this is? I can't see you, but this is a female red-winged blackbird. And her counterpart, the male red-winged blackbird. These guys are on the move now in mixed blackbird flocks, the female and the male. It's hard to explain, but once I saw a flock of the females, they were migrating together in the fall. I was down at Edwin Forsyth National Wildlife Refuge, and just the way the sun struck them, this just doesn't do it justice. And the way they were moving, they were just stunning with their buffy brown and white and little patches of red. And for a moment, my friends and I were like, oh yes, female red wings. And there's the male, likes to show off his red epaulette. Makes a lot of noise. They're moving around. Watch for them. They mix with common grackles and starlings and cowbirds. So this is just about the end of the slides. This is, of course, our state bird, American goldfinch. It is a tiny bird. It has sort of a plaintive song. It nests very late in the year. It makes and it nests. It nests sort of at the same time the composite flowers are peaking. It likes to use thistledown for to line its nest. A lot of birds use a soft material to line just the very cup of the nest. And this bird makes a very tight cup nest, like almost waterproof. And they nest in a very loose colony, and they do nest later in the year, so that in September, I hear the two-noted call of the young goldfinches. Then I know fall is really approaching, because I don't hear them until they're well out of the nest and just about fledged, and they have this little two-noted song. And here is the magnificent, the male in a crabapple tree. Crabapple trees are, again, early nectar sources for hummingbirds, as well as other birds who nectar or eat the sweet petals. American goldfinch. And this guy, if they're birds of the feeder and one of them is the goldfinch is going to get the perches and really enjoy the seed. So here is a short list of resources. American Bird Conservancy, Cornell Lab of Ornithology, that allaboutbirds.org is all about birds. Cornell Lab has the biggest sound library in the world, the Macaulay Library, and they have multimedia and life histories and what to feed. It goes on and on. National Audubon, this particular page indicates particular plants for backyard birds. I think you can do it by zip code. because obviously in Central Jersey, we're not going to grow the same native plants that they're growing maybe in Florida or California or Maine. Rutgers Master Gardeners of Mercer County, fabulous resource for everything you want to know about gardening and turf and soil. NewJerseyAudubon.org. They also have pages about native plants, the Native Plant Society of New York. I just listed these few books because I had consulted them before this. They're some of my favorites and they have important information. This answers a lot of questions about just basic bird facts in a very handy, easy to use form. This will tell you the status and distribution of the birds in New Jersey. So if you're thinking you're seeing a laughing gull in the winter, well, you're probably not, because they're not here in the winter, and that gives you the status and distribution. Bringing Nature Home, Douglas Tallamy, Dr. Douglas Tallamy is fabulous. It's all about recreating that green landscape between knitting the green quilt back together so that we have a corridor, a safe corridor for birds to move through every season. And Native Plants of the Northeast, Donald Leopold, not related to Aldo because I asked him once. And visit your local library for many, many more. I'm leaving this up just for a second in case you want to take a picture of it with your phone, but there's great resources out there. And again, local library can help you with all of those things. Thank you so much. And I'll end with that.
Thanks so much, Kathy. That's a great shot. We have quite a few questions for you and for the Master Gardeners. I think first and foremost, people are particularly interested in how can I get a list of all of the plants that you mentioned in the beginning, or even like a full list of like every native plant I should plant in my yard. Garden area to attract birds. Like what resources can you offer for that? Does the Master Gardeners provide a list?
Yes, there's a fact sheet that is about native plants. I didn't list that. It's a Rutgers fact sheet, and you can find it on the Mercer County Master Gardeners webpage. You can get to the Rutgers fact sheets. Is that correct, Kathleen? You're muted. You're muted, Kathleen.
Perhaps also I can send it out to all attendees.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to list, you know, does everyone, when they register, did they provide their email? Because I can send these things to Kim, who can then send them to you. So a list of the plants, okay, that I showed to that, and then I can send the resources. I mean, the resources as well. Does that work?
Yeah, that would be great, and it would. I'm sure that everybody would appreciate it.
Sure.
Terrific, thank you. So somebody has a very Master Gardening question about plants that are good for birds. Susan Gobat says, I have service berries, but they get cedar apple rust. How to prevent?
Kathleen, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I don't have that information right at my fingertips, but if you were to go to Rutgers Extension Service, the Cooperative Extension Service, you can get Rutgers fact sheets and you can look up that problem. They have a wonderful resource.
And is there a link to the Rutgers Extension right on the Master Gardener page, Kathleen? I don't recall. Do you know, or do you go to that separately?
I would go to it separately.
Okay. I only have one service berry, and my service berry, it does get the cedar apple rust every year. And I mean, but the birds are still there. And there are ways to prevent it, which, as Kathleen said, you can find on the Rutgers Extension site. They do have information about that.
Great, thank you so much. Sharon Gee says, I have a Baltimore Oriole that comes in the winter and leaves in the spring, the opposite of what it's supposed to do. How can I get it to stay through the spring and summer?
Oh my gosh, so that's so wonderful. So that bird probably comes down from the north somewhat, and you've got everything it needs for the winter, and then it goes back up north to a more northerly place to breed, maybe, is my best guess. But lucky you, because lucky you. And well, you know, maybe that one won't stay, but there will be others that arrive because they come back and nest in the area. Listen for them and look for the like the pendant shaped nest hanging from sort of an outer branch, often not far from water.
A lot of people are noticing that the bird life that they are used to seeing over time is changing. Debbie O'Rourke says 2 weeks ago, we had over 100 to 200 robins come in a swarm and wiped out the berries in our holly tree. Have had in the past, but this seemed earlier than normal. We live in Monmouth County. Is this due to the warmer days we're experiencing?
I don't know. With the holly berries, there's a certain point where they reach a particular ripeness where it's just the right chemistry for the bird, after so many freezes. It's just birds are always moving around, and yes, things are different in terms of the warmth and the seasons. Things have changed a little bit, and certainly they do have to adapt. So maybe I just really don't know. But check the Cornell website and see what they say about that, if other people have observed it, because citizen scientists have provided all kinds of information to Cornell, because they also host developed eBird, and so people from all over the world are reporting birds they see every day, and they can extract data from that. There's no question that the population of many families of birds has declined. I've seen it in just the 40 years I've been birding. But some other species are doing really well for different reasons. So, it's always changing. But what we each can do is to keep a chemical-free garden, a river-friendly garden, and plant native trees, because native plants are where it's at. And then there's all kinds of other plants to add to that, in terms of like perennials, to attract the pollinators and to provide the larvae that the birds eat.
I just want to add something about the robins. This February, there have been huge groups of robins in my community, and they come down and swarm in a particular location, and then the following day they're someplace else but close by. It's as if they're going from place to place.
They're in one place and they eat a fair amount of food, and then they move to another place, and that's what they do the whole cold season. And during the season, their behavior is different in the sense that, well, they travel as a group, and they're very wary, more wary than they are during the summer. The thing about robins, they've historically roosted in great numbers, and in the old days, people who needed them to eat, I suppose, would shoot a shotgun into a tree and kill 100 birds with one shotgun blast. It seems like a lot of work to clean all those birds for supper, but they used to be hunted, and there were a lot of robins that were killed during that time. But they've come back from that, as well as the Dutch elm disease, which affected the worms, which affected the robins, especially out in Michigan. What they treated the Dutch elm disease with. Anyway, yeah, robins, but they're here. They'll be singing. As a matter of fact, they might start to annoy you, because the robin in my yard, I know that my guy's back, or the local robins, when they sing just before sunrise every day and at sundown every night. But when they're singing every morning before sunrise and it's the robin, I know those are the guys that are going to stick.
Thank you. So I'm going to wrap a couple of questions together. One is a quick one. We have a couple of questions about water. Obviously birds need water all winter, and having a water source is important, but how do you keep the water fresh, one, and not frozen, two? Do you have any suggestions?
Okay, so keeping it fresh, just don't have a giant vessel that you keep it in. I have a small bird feeder, which I can dump out and fill with a pitcher, and during the summer I do that twice a day at least. Then I have a larger one that was a wedding gift 37 something years ago, that's cement that I've never moved because I'm afraid to. But that one I use, I clean it out and then use the hose, the pressure of the hose to rinse it out, and then I fill it part way. And I always put a rock in the middle, so that insects and smaller birds can get into the bath. Keeping it from freezing, well, there are definitely warming devices that you can buy, but short of that, short of having something electric, and maybe something floats with a battery, I'm not sure. If you have a very small one, you can break it up on the cold days and put fresh water in it, which is what I do for my Mockingbird pal. It's a small piece of copper dish, maybe holds 2 cups of water, if that, and there's a stone in the middle that I keep to break up the ice when it does freeze. Now there's sometimes it's just too frigid, and so I just pour some very hot water on top, make sure it's cooled, and run back in the house. And mostly I'm servicing the Mockingbird. Now a lot of other birds use that too, because they like fresh, clean water. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And we also have a lot of questions about birdseed.
Oh, birdseed. I knew we'd get back to that. Okay.
So like, are there ones that you recommend, places that you recommend to purchase it? Somebody said they tried no waste birdseed, but the birds hate it. Are sunflower seeds the best seed for bird? So if you could speak to that.
Okay, so I do have another slide. You want to avoid fillers. The best bird food, and first of all, have a clean feeder, clean your feeder regularly, check one of the resources, clean up the seed below the feeder regularly if it's one that has the husks. Yeah, so the best bird seed is black oil sunflower seed because it's really nutritious. It's small, a lot fits in the bird feeder. It is expensive, but it appeals to the most species of birds. You know, you can go from there and get those little, let's not really suet, I don't think anymore, but those little cakes. But the most important thing about feeding birds is keep the bird feeder clean, keep the bird feeder area clean, and that goes for the winter too. And then gray striped sunflower seed is another good one. I can send a list. I have a list that was taken from Pete Dunn's Birding Basics or something, and I'll send a list of seeds to avoid. I just can't remember what they are. Okay, so good and bad.
That's helpful. Now I have a very specific question. Butch Struskowitz said, I once had a visit from a gorgeous Baltimore Oriole, but only once. What plant is most attractive to Orioles?
Oh gosh, I don't know. That's a really good question. Well, okay. One thing I'll say about songbirds, it's very important. Almost all of our songbirds that are here, especially the ones like the neotropical migrant, you know, the Oriole, they feed their young insects, because the young need the protein to grow the little bird bones. I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, they certainly have favored foods, or certain trees, you know, have the insects eating them. I'll see if I can find an answer to that. Mature trees, if there's mature trees around, because they'll nest in those. They like to nest near water. It might be that things have changed, you know, buffer wise in terms of, you know, the greenscape in the area, and that might have changed, and maybe the bird doesn't come back now. Or get out and go birding to places where you might see them, certain parks, you know, where there's mature trees and water not far away, and you should probably look out.
Somebody notes that Orioles are attracted to orange halves and grape jelly, but they often pass through here to nesting areas a bit further north.
Yeah, that is true. Because I think my sister puts out grape jelly and the catbirds go crazy about it. I don't know anything about whether that's actually good for the birds or not, but she puts out grape jelly and she has a little camera anyway. And she's had Oriole also. Yeah, some people who have their Orioles in the winter put out cut oranges in there's a certain fruit feeder you can get and put a piece of orange in there, and they do like oranges. Orioles, I do know that.
Terrific. We have a couple of people recommending safflower seed as well.
I can't say off the top of my head if that's one of them. It might be. It sounds right because it's so similar. That could be true. And if they have experience with it and it works, then there you go.
Yeah, and apparently grackles don't like it, which they find it fun.
Oh, well, that's appealing, of course, because the grackles, yeah, you know, their population has sort of diminished too. And you look at them in the sun, maybe when they're not so raucous, and look at their beautiful iridescent colors that will light up your day.
Somebody wants to specifically know, we've spoken about the orioles, but what about the rose-breasted grosbeak?
So
What
there's,
is that to attract them?
they come to bird feeders. Not everyone feeds their birds in the summer because there's more regular cleanup involved and cleaning. But my experience is, I've seen them come to crabapple trees in the spring. But I think, and during migration too, that they will come to I've seen lots of pictures of them coming to bird feeders. Other than that, I'm not sure what to plant to attract them, but you can look up on the Cornell site all about birds. If you look at the life histories, it will tell you specifically what those birds eat.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see, I'm trying to go through them. All right, this is, I know, going to be of interest to a lot of people. How do you choose native plants that the deer won't eat?
Okay, on the extension, on the Rutgers extension website, I don't think there's anything other than maybe daffodils that is really deer proof. That's where a variety of plants comes in too. So you've got something that maybe the deer can eat over there. There are lists and some advice about that on the Rutgers extension website, and probably on the Master Gardener's site too.
Yes. Yes.
And so sometimes, maybe there's things you can plant that they don't like the smell of. That's a tough one because of the white-tailed deer population in New Jersey. However, in some places, the population has sort of gone down a bit. Yeah, that's a tough one, but check the Master Gardener and the Rutgers Extension website for more information about that.
Well, and Patricia Donahue, who's a Middlesex Master Gardener, is presenting a deer presenting on deer for the Rutgers Ready to Garden program. So,
fabulous.
Another plug there.
All right.
Thanks, Patricia. So there's a bunch of questions just generally about bird feeders. So the questions are like, when can we put them out? Like, some people only put them out in the winter. Is year-round feeding okay?
Yeah.
And there's a specific question too about this avian flu. Like, should we take precautions about bird feeders?
That's why you clean the feeder, and that includes when you have those tube feeders with the little holes. I haven't heard anything about avian flu lately, but the more prevalent disease was conjunctivitis in house finches that was transferring to some other species. Birds put their head through the little opening to get the seed, and then the bacteria rubs off, and it doesn't kill them, but it does render them blind at some point, and then they can't eat, and that's that. But so cleaning it is important. You get clean, good seed, and you make sure your feeder is clean and the ground around the feeder is clean. So it's a job. It's you can't just put it out and forget about it. You have to maintain it to help keep the birds. In terms of feeders, there's a lot of stuff out there. Again, if you check the National Audubon site and the Cornell site, and you can get some information. And certainly locally, New Jersey Audubon has a shop at Sherman Hoffman Center in Bernardsville. You could call them and ask them for advice, or I think they have bird feeders, and maybe I'm wrong about this. Check the website to see what's good. You don't want anything you want it to be safe for the birds, and you want to be able to clean it easily. Keep that in mind when you get a feeder.
Okay, thank you. Okay, as I'm trying to sort of decide on a last question, because we're now at 8 o'clock, I will just note that Anna Muster, who is recommending Toadshade Farm.
Oh yes, Toadshade Farm, excellent. Yes, I can't do that necessarily, but yeah, Toadshade Farm and Wild Ridge plants.
Yes, although they moved a little bit, yeah.
Oh, there's another one. And this is me personally, not as a master gardener necessarily, but my personal experience. Yes, I can recommend those. I'm not sure. There's probably, you can probably Google a list of native plants. I know there's some places in Pennsylvania.
We're getting a lot of recommendations now coming up.
Great, yes, put it in. Okay.
If you Google it, everybody can put it into the chat, but we're very lucky to have a lot of excellent nurseries in the area.
And I just want to say this, please talk to your nurseries. We're the consumers. Tell them you want to see more native plants, because nurseries are going to stock what sells. And sometimes the same old stuff that isn't great or possibly even invasive, like please don't anyone ever plant barberry. Anyway, so talk to them and say you're looking for native plants and let them know, because we'd like to see, you know, personally as a gardener, I'd like to see that change. It's good for the birds and the insects.
Okay, I'm going to close with one that's probably not fair, but is an easy one in some ways for me to end on. Okay. So now that we've done all this planting, we've provided cover and places for birds to live and drink, and plants for them to eat, and we're leaving up our winter stems so that birds can, so that bugs can nest in them. Mm-hmm. And we're sort of thinking about different bird seed, preferably black sunflower seed oil for our bird feeders. Now we want to watch them. What type of binoculars would you recommend to view the birds?
Oh, definitely call New Jersey Audubon. And you know what? They have a sale every March or early April. And I mean, I can tell you with the 2 pairs of binoculars that we have in the house, but they're both aged. My current pair of Swarovski ELs is from 2003, and binoculars have come a long way. They're still very pricey, but the important thing about binoculars is that they're comfortable in your hands and you can see through them. So there are other places that sell binoculars, maybe sporting goods places, but try them out. That's the best thing. Or if a friend has binoculars, try them out and see if you like them, because there's different weights, there's different focuses. But in terms of birding, generally you want to get something like an 8x42, because if you get something much smaller, you're going to have a hard time seeing the further away birds. If you get something bigger, you won't be able to see the closer things. So determine if you're going to be looking, you know, mid-range, long range, or if you're going to mostly be just in the, you know, on the easy chair, watching the birds in your beautiful garden. New Jersey Audubon, because they know about binoculars, that's why I'm recommending, and they can help you over the phone. And they also have pages on their website about binoculars, as does Cornell. So Cornell and Audubon, they have references on their websites, I believe, about binoculars, or give them a call.
Fantastic. And a little plug for the library. The library has, in our library of things, binoculars that you can borrow. So if you're a library card holder with us, you can borrow some of our binocs. We also have nature backpacks, so there are binoculars for kids in those. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for this presentation. And Kathleen Urett, I believe you're going to close us out.
Well, thank you, Kathy. That was such a wonderful, wonderful presentation. We learned so much, and I think we also learned that the birds have a friend in you. And thank you, Kim, and the Princeton Public Library for including us.
Thank you.
And all these great activities for the great backyard bird count. I do want to say that the Master Gardeners are inviting you all to visit our Mercer Educational Gardens, which are in Pennington on Federal City Road. Not only is it a great place to do birding, but it also has many themed gardens that are maintained by the Master Gardeners. Which reminds me that in the fall, we will have an in-person, finally, program at MEG on composting. So you will hear about that, which means you really should be in visit our website, Rutgers Master Gardener of Mercer County. You'll hear all about our upcoming programs. We have many articles about gardening. And also there's a place to register to get on our mailing list. Yeah. So I'm going to have to say good night.
Oh, I just want to add one thing, excuse me, I'm so sorry, but at Mercer Educational Gardens, there's a native plant garden. So you can go there and everything is labeled and signed, and you can begin to learn about native plants. Go there early in the spring as you can see them emerge, and then go back every season, and all the other gardens will be coming alive. So I highly endorse a visit to Mercer Educational Gardens.
Thank you for the advertisement, Kathy. Good night to everyone, and may the birds be with you.
Have a wonderful evening. Good night.